Hey guys, tonight we saddle up for a slow, windswept ride across the Mongolian steppe, not to fight, not to conquer, not even to deliver a dramatic speech, but just to eat, ride, and maybe not fall off the horse while trying to chew something vaguely edible. You're now a postal rider under the mighty Mongol Empire, galloping between stations with urgent messages tucked under your arm, and, more importantly, a saddlebag full of weird, wonderful, and occasionally unchewable snacks. And spoiler alert, you probably wouldn't survive this. Not because of bandits, or wolves, or exposure, but because your breakfast includes hard cheese that could double as a doorstop, your lunch involves rehydrating dried meat in a leather pouch, and your water? Fermented. On purpose. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time at IS. I love seeing the sleepy postal network we're building around the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start in Karakoram, the capital. It's early, too early. Really, and your horse is still half asleep, snorting softly in the frosty dawn. You pull your fur-lined coat tighter, swing into the saddle, and feel the weight of the message scroll under your tunic. You're headed east, over open country, past hills and herds and silence. But first, you eat. Breakfast isn't fancy. You're not at a banquet. You're crouched beside your horse, chewing something firm, vaguely tangy, and not exactly warm. It's Olsen dried curds of milk. You've had them since you were a child. Everyone has. Hard, sour, oddly addictive. They're small, dense, and designed to outlive you. They rattle in your pouch like river pebbles. You suck on them between breaths. They're not meant to be enjoyed. They're meant to keep you going. And they do. You tuck a few more into your belt pouch, along with a strip of dried meat and a soft leather pouch of fermented mare's milk. It fizzes slightly when you tip it, like a yogurt soda with boundary issues. It's sour. It's fizzy. It's alive. And it's your electrolyte boost for the next 10 hours of hard galloping. As your horse begins to trot, you feel the rhythm settle into your spine. You lean forward slightly, keeping your balance just right. Riders learn young how to eat without stopping. Your hands stay on the reins. Your mouth finds the next chunk of cheese like a practiced motion. You learn to chew rhythmically, not too fast, not too slow. By mid-morning, the wind sharpens. You reach for a pouch of tallow-rendered animal fat, shaped into bite-sized bits. They're bland, greasy, powerful. Calories condensed into portable, lard-laced nuggets. You chase them with more arrow. It's a strange combination, chewy sour with buttery slick, but your body thanks you later. Every rider has their own preferences. Some carry dried liver. Others swear by clotted cream cakes wrapped in cloth. You once met a man who kept a smoked fish in his saddlebag. It lived there for a week. So did the smell. Historians still argue whether Mongol postal riders were issued standard rations or made do with whatever they could carry. Some say there were supply points. Others insist that riders lived off the land and kindness. Either way, there's one constant. They had to keep moving. No matter what. Your stomach grumbles, but you're used to that. Hunger is part of the rhythm. It comes and goes like the wind. And when you really can't ignore it, there's always another bit of dried mutton, or a scrap of bread hardened into something resembling fossilized cloud. As noon slides into afternoon, you spot the next Ortua relay station. It's just a low building, a corral, and a man waiting with a fresh horse and a bowl of something steaming. You pass the scroll, swing onto the new mount, but not before grabbing a handful of dumplings from the man's pot. Still hot, still oily. Heaven in a bowl made of practical necessity. You ride on, dumplings in one hand, reins in the other, the scent of mutton clinging to your gloves. They're chewy, savory, maybe filled with something you don't want to identify. Doesn't matter. You don't stop chewing. You don't stop riding. The afternoon sun stretches long shadows across the steppe, golden light draping the hills in slow motion. Your second horse is faster, younger, and twitchier than the last, its hooves drumming a steady beat beneath you as you settle into the ride again. Pouch of food swinging at your side like a second pulse. You're not hungry yet. Not really, but you know better than to wait. Energy isn't something you manage in the Mongol postal system. It's something you feed in intervals, before it dips, before it starts making decisions for you. So you reach down and pull out something that looks like it shouldn't be edible and kind of still isn't. A lump of rendered fat, also known in your circle as travel butter, or more affectionately, chewy fuel. It's firm but yields in your fingers, pale and slightly waxy. You bite into it and immediately feel your body react not with joy, but with obedience. Fat equals distance. There's no seasoning, no flair, just pure, dense energy. One nugget can keep you from passing out before sundown. You chew and ride, chew and ride. You chase it with a swig of arag, the ever-present fermented mare's milk. It's sour today, sharper than usual, maybe because it's been riding with you in a warm pouch against your side. The heat hasn't helped, but you don't mind. That familiar twang at the back of your tongue, the mild buzz behind your ears, it's comforting, in a fermented, fizzy, this should not still be bubbling kind of way. Arag isn't just a drink. It's a statement, a nutritional gamble, a community tradition. You remember your uncle once saying, if it doesn't make your face scrunch, it won't carry you to the next relay. You weren't sure if he meant that spiritually or just about lactic acid. You adjust your seat slightly, pull your scarf tighter against the wind, and pass a herd of yaks dotting the hillside like slow-moving boulders. One of them turns to watch you, chewing thoughtfully. You nod. Respect. By now, your pouch of snacks is feeling lighter. That's fine. You know what you're saving for later? The milk skin. That's right. You've got a little folded square of dried milk film, scorched from the top of boiled cream, hardened into a travel treat. Some riders fold them into thicker hunks, like weird dairy origami. You prefer to suck on yours slowly, letting it soften while the miles tick by. Some say milk skin is an acquired taste. Others say it's not a taste at all, just a texture experience wrapped in emotional resilience. Either way, it melts eventually. Kind of. Historians still argue whether Mongol riders developed these foods as innovations of necessity or just made do with what the land gave them. You suspect it's both. The land doesn't spoil its children, but it doesn't abandon them either. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk screeches. Your horse flicks an ear. You steady the reins and remember that you've still got one piece of goat fat candy left. It's not candy in the modern sense, it's just fat shaped into a lozenge and maybe rolled in dry milk powder for flair. You take a bite. It crumbles, slowly. Your body hums with its dense quietness. The trick to this kind of food is accepting it doesn't want to impress you. It's not trying to win awards. It's just trying to keep you alive and moving, which, frankly, is more than most meals can say. You pass over a ridge, sunlight pouring behind you like warm breath. The horizon rolls out in every direction, no walls, no signs, just land. Your next or two is still hours away, but you're not worried. Your horse is strong. Your pouch is almost empty, but your body is full of fat and fermented determination. And that's really all you need out here. The wind picks up as evening drapes itself across the steppe, tugging at your sleeves, whistling through the sparse grass like it's trying to tell you something you're too tired to decode. Your horse snorts, shifts its gait slightly, but you keep riding rhythmic, automatic, half in your saddle and half in your thoughts. And in your pouch, tucked between a folded cloth and a bit of crumpled wax skin, is the next big star of the Mongol Postal diet, dried meat. It's hard, like really hard. Hard enough that you could probably build a modest shelter out of the stuff if you were desperate. But it's also strangely satisfying if you know what to do with it. You dig out a strip bark, thin, fibrous, and slip it into your mouth. You don't bite it, not yet. You just let it sit. This is Trail Wisdom 101. Rehydrate the meat in your mouth first, or risk chipping a tooth and getting laughed at by your replacement rider. The meat was sliced thin, hung to dry in the wind, and smoked with whatever was nearby. Sagebrush, animal dung, even windthin pine if you're lucky. It's called borts, and it's basically the Mongol version of pocket jerky but drier, tougher, and far less forgiving. You suck on it for a while, then begin to chew slowly. It breaks down in stages: resistance, surrender, and finally, flavor. The taste is earthy, faintly sweet, and smoky, though you suspect that's more about memory than seasoning. Some riders boil their borts at the relay stations, making soup in saddle-warmed canteens with a pinch of salt or a few wild onions picked along the trail. You've tried that. It works, sort of. But there's something primal about chewing it raw, feeling each tendon fiber unravel like time itself. It forces you to slow down even as your horse gallops on. There's a small skin bag at your hip that holds a bit of water, but it's not for drinking, not yet. It's for soaking a piece of meat if you've really had enough of chewing leather and want something closer to stew. Riders tuck small strips into their water pouches to soften mid-ride, then pull them out a few hours later, a little soggy but blessedly tender. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or just the mark of the more fastidious, well-prepared rider. Some say each order provided meat. Others argue it was all self-supplied, a testament to endurance and pre-planning. As usual, the truth probably lies somewhere between practicality and desperation. You remember one old rider who claimed to wrap his borts in wild mint to give it flavor and grace. You tried that once. It tasted like regret and weeds. You never tried again. The sun slips lower. You reach into your pouch and find a strip of organ meat-dried heart, maybe liver. It's different. Lighter, almost crumbly, with a bitter richness that feels like it came from a colder place. You chew it slowly, thoughtfully, watching the horizon ripple in gold and purple. There's an odd peace that comes from eating the same thing, day after day, bite after bite. No menus. No surprises. Just you, your pouch, and the long trail ahead. It gets cold now. You tighten your cloak, shift in your saddle, and begin humming to yourself one of those wordless melodies that every rider knows, passed down from saddle to saddle, a lullaby for horses and empty stomachs. As the stars begin to appear, so does a shape in the distance, the glow of firelight, the dark square of a post station, and the promise of something warm. Not warm in the way you're used to, but warm enough. Maybe tonight there'll be broth. Maybe there'll be more borts, boiled this time, thickened with flour, or maybe a spare dumpling if someone's feeling generous. Or maybe there'll be nothing but a bowl of water, a slab of dried meat, and a place to sit. And honestly, that sounds perfect. Because on this trail, the food isn't for pleasure. It's for rhythm. Chew. Ride. Swallow. Remember, your horse slows as you near the outpost, a squat stone-and-wood structure set into the curve of a hill, barely visible until you're on top of it. There's a low fence, a smudge of smoke rising from the chimney, and one lone lantern swaying in the wind, which creaks every few seconds like it's still thinking about something it forgot to say. You dismount stiffly, legs wobbly from the ride, your teeth still working on that last stubborn scrap of dried liver you stashed in your cheek hours ago like a snack squirrel. A man waves from the doorway, motioning you inside. But before you take a seat, before the fire gets to your bones, you reach into your saddlebag and pull out a cloth-wrapped treasure, Errol. Again. Yes, it's time to talk about it properly. Because Errol isn't just food, it's a commitment. A dried dairy product that looks like chalk, smells like sour memories, and eats like something your ancestors dared you to survive. It's made by taking fermented milk, draining the liquid, usually whey, pressing the solids, shaping them, and then drying them in the sun until they resemble small, hardened biscuits or lumpy cubes of fossilized yogurt. They come in different sizes and textures, some powdery, others like tiny rocks. Some even have little ridges from the wooden boards they were pressed on. All of them can survive harsh temperatures, long travel, and at least 3 attempted toothings before they give up their essence. You take a bite. Well, you attempt to bite. Then, remembering the trick, you just leave it in your cheek like a slow-dissolving pebble of protein and dairy funk. It softens eventually. Sort of. The other riders in the hut are doing the same, chewing silently, blinking at the fire, holding steaming bowls in one hand and stubborn curds in the other. One man holds up a piece and taps it on the side of his bowl. Clink. Clink. You know it's good, he says, when it sounds like pottery. There's laughter. Even the goat tethered outside snorts approvingly. Some riders carry flavored aerosols mixed with berries, or honey, or herbs. But purists scoff at these additions. If it tastes good, one once told you, you can't trust it. And he was chewing something that looked like it had been carved from limestone. Errol's purpose isn't joy. It's sustenance. It doesn't spoil. It doesn't crumble. It doesn't melt. It just stays with you. Through rides, through storms, through time. Historians still debate how far back Errol goes. Some say it predates the postal system. Others think it developed alongside the horse relay network as a compact way to feed both messenger and message. There's even a theory that some elite riders carved their initials into the bigger pieces, like edible heirlooms. You wouldn't be surprised. After your Errol has softened into something closer to edible, you finally break it apart with your molars, letting the tangy, sour flavor spread across your tongue like a low-key insult. It's not bad. just demanding. You wash it down with warm goat's milk, spiced lightly with wild thyme. The fire crackles. Outside, the wind stirs again, whispering through the doorframe like an old story trying to finish itself. Someone offers you another piece of arrowwool from their stash, one shaped like a crescent moon. You nod and take it, even though you know it will take at least an hour to get through. Because that's how it goes. On the trail, food isn't something you plan. It's something you negotiate. Your teeth do their work. Your stomach makes peace with your decisions. Your body remembers the pattern. Chew, ride, breathe, wait. You fall asleep that night with a crumb of arrowwool still pressed against your molar, dissolving like the last whisper of a 1,000-mile ride. The next morning, before the sun has even peaked above the curve of the eastern hills, you're already back in the saddle. The sky is that pre-dawn blue-gray that makes everything feel like it's been dipped in cold tea. Your horse huffs steam, and your fingers are stiff from the chill, but you ride. Because that's what you do. That's what the Yam riders always do. And halfway through your first hour on the trail, your stomach reminds you of something you've learned to respect: the tactical importance of broth. Soup on the move sounds like an oxymoron. But Mongol postal riders had their ways. You dig into your saddlebag and pull out what looks like a lump of brownish chalk wrapped in hide. This is your soup brick, essentially condensed stock, crafted by boiling bones, meat scraps, and fat down to a thick, concentrated paste, then drying it into a portable puck of salty promise. It's not pretty. It smells like regret and usefulness. But it's what you need. At your next brief rest, you set about preparing your trail soup. You've done this 100 times. Heat watcher if you're lucky enough to have fire. If not, wrap a flat-bottom flask in wool and wedge it between your horse and saddle as you ride. After an hour of bouncing against your thigh, it's warm enough. Probably. You add the soup brick and shake. Gently. Then more aggressively. Eventually, it dissolves into something vaguely soupy. The broth is thin, but full of salt, fat, and tiny, hopeful bits of protein. You slurp it down as your horse grazes for a moment. It's not delicious. But your limbs loosen, your eyes stop squinting, and most importantly, you feel operational again. This is not a luxurious meal. This is efficiency broth. Sometimes, if you're feeling fancy or someone at the last station took pity, you'll have a scrap of flour paste or a sliver of dried onion to toss in. But mostly, it's just broth and your own determination. The Mongols didn't invent soup, but they absolutely perfected portable soup. Historians still debate the origin of these soup bricks. Some say they were issued as standard courier rations. Others believe each family had its own version. Some riders would dry slices of boiled sheep fat into translucent noodles, roll them around in herbs, and stack them like dumpling paper for soup enhancement. Others just added hot water and drank straight from the pouch. One senior rider you knew used to keep a little cup made from a hollowed horn tucked into his boot. He claimed the shape made the broth taste more serious. You tried it once. It did, but mostly because it smelled faintly of whatever else had lived in the horn. You sip, watching the light stretch across the grasslands. The wind carries a hawk's cry overhead, and your horse flicks its ears, alert but calm. Food isn't about pleasure out here. It's about persistence. You need calories that won't spoil, flavors that won't distract, and meals that require nothing more than a little heat and a lot of chewing. You pack away the last of your soup, drinking the dregs with a tilt of your flask, and slip the empty pouch back into your saddlebag, where it'll probably absorb whatever flavors linger from last week's butterfat. Nothing is truly clean out here, but everything has its place. You ride on. The land yawns out in all directions. You pass a herd of shaggy horses in the distance, barely distinguishable from the terrain. There's a man herding them with a long pole and what might be the faint outline of a yurt beyond him. He offers you a wave. You nod back, and then reach into your pouch. There's another soup brick waiting. Hard, unyielding, essential, and it will taste just fine after a few hours of being warmed by your saddle and your resolve. By midday, the sun is bright enough to bleach the edge of the sky, casting long shadows from your horse's legs and turning your cloak into a slow-cooking oven. You ride on, squinting, half lost in the sound of hooves and the soft slap of your travel bag against your hip. And then you reach in for your next snack. This one is soft. Sort of. You unwrap a tightly bound cloth parcel and find what looks like an off-white, waxy cube with slightly melted edges. It's not cheese. It's not soap. It's not a mistake. It's Urumph clotted cream scraped from the top of boiled milk, cooled, and carefully congealed into a squat, fatty block of Mongolian trail resilience. Unlike butter, urum doesn't melt easily unless you leave it directly in the sun, which you've definitely done before, and unlike cheese, it doesn't crumble. It holds together. In your fingers, in your pouch, in your memory. You take a cautious bite. It's thick, coating, rich in a way that's not indulgent but commanding. It grabs your tongue, plants a little dairy flag, and dares you to keep chewing. You do, because your body knows that in this climate, in this job, fat is friend. Some riders mix urum with flour and sugar when they're lucky, pressing it into little cakes. Others spread it on bortsog, deep-fried dough that you never have when you want it. You've eaten urum frozen, sun-softened, once even fermented, and that was a day you'll never forget, or fully forgive. Historians still puzzle over just how the Mongols managed to make dairy so central to their survival. But when your land is wide and your livestock are mobile, milk becomes your harvest. And its byproducts, its curds, skins, creams, and odd surprises are the pantry that travels with you. Urum is different from the dried curds you've been chewing all week. This is the pause button. It's the closest thing to comfort food a courier gets. It won't make you weep for home, but it might make you pause under a tree and think about it for a moment. You take another bite, slower this time, letting it melt on your tongue while your horse ambles on, choosing its own path through the soft scrub. Your mouth feels coated, slightly warm from the dairy, but it settles in your belly like a polite stone, quiet, weighty, oddly soothing. And then, like clockwork, you chase it with a sip of arak. It sounds like a mistake mixing clotted cream and fizzy fermented milk, but somehow it balances. Like throwing a lasso of weirdness around your stomach and giving it a firm, reassuring tug. You recall one evening at a relay station when a veteran courier made a little cake from urum, pressed into a flour wrap with a hint of wild plum jam. He called it jubilation pie. You never saw him make it again, but you dreamt about it twice. Not all urum is good. Sometimes it sours. Sometimes it picks up whatever other flavors are rolling around in your packhorse: sweat, mystery herbs, dust. But you never throw it away. You just adjust your expectations. Today's batch is fine. Solid. A bit tangy. Maybe a hint of firewood from the pot it was scraped from. You chew the last bite thoughtfully, then tuck the cloth back into your pack. Outside, the wind picks up again. It smells of wool, grass, and something sharp you can't quite name, like distant lightning with no thunder behind it. You ride through it, quietly fueled by a snack made of cream and courage. And somewhere behind you, a bird calls overhead, as if to say, that was definitely dairy, and you're still alive. Impressive. As you crest a low ridge and the land spreads out before you like a wrinkled blanket of dry grass and shallow riverbeds, your thoughts drift naturalito vegetables. Not because you're about to eat one, but because you almost never do. Still, somewhere in the depths of your saddlebag, past the clotted cream wrapper and your emergency soup brick, there is a small twist of cloth. Inside, something both strange and precious. Pickled radish. Yes, really. You pull it out like it's contraband. Because on the step, vegetables aren't a given. They're a miracle. A pickle is a rare treasure, a taste of brightness in a world built from meat, milk, and endurance. This one survived at least 2 weeks of travel, several unintentional sittings, and one night spent under your sleeping mat during a thunderstorm. And somehow, it still smells. Edible. The radish slice is soft and salty. Tangy, with a sourness that says, I am the one good thing left in this pouch. You pop it into your mouth and let it sit on your tongue for a moment before chewing. It doesn't crunch anymore, but it hums with the memory of freshness. Pickled vegetables weren't common on the trail, but they existed especially closer to more settled outposts or when kind hands at a relay station passed them along like gifts. Carrots, cabbage, even the occasional turnip might be sliced, salted, brined, and then packed tight in clay jars or oil-soaked leather wraps. You've had smoked radish once. It tasted like burnt opportunity, but you ate it anyway, because on the move, flavor is secondary to survival. Still, little bursts of taste like today's radish become emotional events. A pickled thing can reset your mood. It can remind you there's a world beyond salt, fat, dairy repetition. A world where food has color. Of course, the rest of your meal is less vivid. You reach for a strip of smoked mutton. This piece is from 2 or 2 ago, left wrapped in a leaf and tucked into your coat. It's gone a bit leathery, but you know the drill. Chew, chew, chew. then swallow and chase with a gulp of water or arak, if you're feeling brave. The mutton was likely smoked over dried dung and brushwood. Not for flavor, but for fuel. It's not bad, but every now and then you bite into something that tastes suspiciously like regret and smoke. You chew through it anyway. Not eating is not an option. Mongol riders didn't waste. Nothing edible was overlooked. And if something wasn't edible at first glance, it was often still considered. You've seen riders nibble on dry roots, make chewing tobacco out of wild herbs, even gnaw the inside of pine bark for calories when pickings were truly slim. You fish around in your pouch and pull out a small cloth satchel with a pinch of salt and dried onion flakes. It's not a full meal, but when sprinkled on dried meat, it almost feels like cooking. You rub it over a hunk of mutton, then take another bite. It's an improvement, which is saying something. Historians still argue whether these spice blends were standardized or personal. Some say the riders passed down secret mixes, heirloom salt bags, and spice powders. Others believe the reality was far more chaotic. Grab what smells good and hope it doesn't fight back. You once tasted a mix that included dried rose petals and fermented garlic. You tried not to cry. As you ride on, the memory of the radish fades, replaced by salt and smoke and wind. You chew idly on a scrap of wild licorice root, a mild sweetener, a distraction, a fiber-filled friend for the road. And then, the best surprise of all, a tiny jar of jam. You'd almost forgotten it. You unwrap it like a secret. It's plum, or maybe sea buckthorn, sour, sweet, and thick. You dip your finger in and taste. Your whole mouth lights up like it remembers being a child. You don't eat the whole thing. You're not a monster. Just enough to remind yourself that food can sing. Even out here. Even now. You tuck it away and ride on. Your breath smells faintly of radish, meat, and stubborn hope. Your horse doesn't judge you. And neither do I. You've been riding for hours now. The sun has dropped low, casting the land in a burnished, golden hush. The only sounds are the steady rhythm of hooves, your horse's breath, and the occasional complaint from your stomach, less a rumble, more a hollow, philosophical protest. Time for something more substantial. You pull the reins gently and dismount near a patch of low brush. It's not a campsite, not officially, but it'll do. Your legs ache. Your pouch feels lighter than it should. But you still have one more trick in there. You untie a tightly bound leather sack. It's not stained with grease and use. You open it cautiously. It's a meat bag. To be precise, a stomach. Cleaned, dried, and reused as a kind of natural thermos for portable sausage. Yes, it's odd. And yes, it smells a little like yesterday's regrets, but it's food, and it'll keep you upright. You tug out a long, pale brown coil of meat stuffed with a mix of organ bits, dried fat, salt, and sometimes grains if someone was feeling generous during preparation. This is the real trail food, packed, greasy, and unapologetic. The outer casing natural, of course he is thick and chewy. You slice into it with a dull knife, the meat giving off a smoky, slightly sour aroma that tells you it's still good, or at least not bad enough to stop eating. You bite in. It's salty, rich, a little crumbly, a little slick, but it's a meal. You chew slowly, letting your body absorb the sheer caloric defiance of it. This food isn't light. It's meant to stick. In your gut, in your memory, in the folds of your pouch for days on end. The stomach bag sausage was popular among long-haul riders for a reason. It could be made in bulk, dried over low heat or smoke, and survive absurd conditions. No wrapping needed. Just tie off the ends and tuck it into a coat, a bag, or the curve of your saddle. You've heard stories of riders losing theirs for a week, finding it again, and still eating it. You're pretty sure you've done that. As you chew, you look out across the flatlands, the grasses trembling under the first hints of nighttime wind. You spot a clump of what might be wild garlic if you were inclined to forage. You're not. You're chewing a bag sausage. That's enough adventure for now. You tear off another bite and think about what might be in it. Don't think too hard. You once bit into one and found a hard lump that may have been a tooth or a particularly confident peppercorn. Either way, you swallowed it. Historians still debate whether these bag meats were deliberately crafted with a recipe or just a case of whatever's left in the pot gets stuffed. Some versions included millet or barley. Others had dried blood, turning them nearly black. A few, oddly, were sweetened with boiled fruit mash and used as bribes for stubborn horses. Yours is classic, basic, satisfying in that stubborn, survivalist way Mongol cuisine tends to be. You take another bite, then wrap the rest and tuck it away. It'll hold. You've still got a long ride ahead tomorrow, and as strange as it feels to admit, you're starting to appreciate the company of your greasy little food pouch. There's comfort in consistency, even if that consistency smells vaguely like a barn fire. You lie back in the grass for a moment, staring at the sky, letting the richness of the sausage settle somewhere between your ribs and your thoughts. Night is coming, but your belly is full. And for now, that's everything. The next morning finds you blinking against a light too bright for how little sleep you got. You clings to your cloak. The sausage pouch placidly has not leaked. Your horse waits patiently, probably wondering why humans need so many naps between stretches of being confusing. You mount up again, and your thoughts turn as they often dodo flatbread. Now, let's be honest, bread isn't the first thing you think of when you imagine Mongol postal cuisine. Flour was precious, ovens were rare, and wheat didn't exactly sprout out of horseback saddlebags. But every so often, usually near a trade route or generous or two, someone slipped a little bit of civilization into your pouch in the form of a pocket pancake. No one agrees on what to call it. You've heard bortsog, deep-fried dough bits, gamer, pan-fried bread, and something that once translated to travel flap, but was definitely made up on the spot. Regardless, the idea is simple. Flour, water, maybe some fat, pressed flat, cooked hot, and forgotten until the perfect hungry moment. You dig one out now. It's cracked at the edges, flecked with flour dust, and slightly curved from being stored next to your knife handle for 2 days. It smells like dust, oil, and possibility. You bite into it. The texture is halfway between a pita and a stale cracker, but it holds. The chewiness returns as you work through it, and by the third bite, your mouth believes in it. Flatbreads like these weren't always planned. Riders would stop at a station and, if time allowed, someone would press a bit of dough onto a hot metal plate or over coals, cook it for 90 seconds, and flip it with a twig. You watched it happen once. It was hypnotic. And then, like most food on this journey, it got wrapped in cloth and stuffed into a pouch until it was mostly memory and crumbs. Yours has one glorious surprise today, a smear of sheep fat in the center that melted and then recongealed, creating a pocket of savory joy right where you needed it. You didn't know this morning would be special, but it is now. Historians still debate whether flatbread was standard fare or just a luxury baked in lucky moments. Some suggest it was traded from caravans moving along the Silk Roads, adapted by Mongols into travel-size sustenance. Others argue it existed in many forms long before any bakery tried to put a name on it. All you know is that it helps. And you need the help, because you've still got 80 kilometers to ride today, and your pouch is running low on novelty. You wash it down with, you guessed it, Iraq. Still fizzy. Still deeply questionable. But now that your stomach has something solid to lean on, it hits just right. You pause. Savor the moment. The air smells faintly of dust and horse sweat, which, by now, reads as homey. You start to move again, feeling oddly grounded by bread. Even in its simplest form, it's a gesture of care. Someone needed this. Someone flipped it. Someone chose to give it to you instead of keeping it. That matters out here. Kindness doesn't need spices. You find another tiny corner of dough wrapped in a square of cloth. You'd forgotten it entirely. It's stale. Very. You still eat it. And now you're smiling. Because despite the repetition, despite the unyielding dryness of dried meat and hard cheese, a good bite of even bad bread has a way of reminding you that you're not just surviving. You're moving forward, bite by bite. The light shifts as you move farther eastless, golden now, more pale and wide, casting soft shadows across the dry land. Your horse snorts occasionally, ears flicking at unseen things. And somewhere deep in your stomach, your breakfast of sheep fat bread and fizzy milk is quietly requesting backup. Which brings you to a rather curious truth of the Mongol courier life. You eat what the horse eats. Well, not exactly, but close. Your saddle pouch has a handful of roasted barley grains, left over from last night's shared meal with the stable boy at the last or two. They're toasted, faintly sweet, and surprisingly satisfying when chewed slowly, especially after a morning of wind and sun and what might have been a nap with your face in your own elbow. You crunch a few now, washing them down with water not from a stream, but from the soft bladder slung across your shoulder, filled hours ago, and now slightly warm. It's still good. Still clean enough. You swish. You swallow. You sigh. Roasted grains were simple, compact, and best of all shared between rider and horse. You'd sprinkle a few into his saddlebag to calm a skittish steed. You'd keep a separate pouch for yourself. But more than once, you've snuck a handful from the horse's bag and pretended they were intentional snacks. Your horse doesn't mind. He gets the better end of the deal anyway. A mix of dried grass cakes, sometimes compressed with oil and minerals, shaped into rough bricks. You've tasted one. Once. You regretted it immediately. But in a moment of desperation out of reach of a relay station, with all your food sweated through or forgotten, those grass cakes start to look curiously snackable. You won't admit how many times you've stared at them, chewing the inside of your cheek, wondering what a bit of jam or melted uruum might do to redeem the flavor. Still, most of the overlap in your diets comes from shared grains, seeds, and that occasional sprinkle of dried legumes, if your order happen to be near a trade point. These legumes are small, wrinkled, and usually half-stale, but toss a few into hot broth and they swell with strange optimism. Historians still puzzle over how Mongol riders sustained themselves with such little fresh food and limited foraging. The answer is often, they didn't. They relied on their horses, their planning, and the network of stations to carry just enough calories forward. But sometimes you reach into your pouch and find something the horse would have loved. A shriveled apple core from a stop 3 days ago. A lump of dried date, stuck to the inside of a cloth. The kind of sugar burst that feels like a festival in your mouth. You eat it in 2 bites. Then wish you hadn't been so fast. There's a joke among riders that if you eat slow enough, the food counts double. You don't know who started it. But it makes you smile every time you chew a barley grain 15 times before swallowing. You pass a small hill, your horse steady beneath you. The saddle creaks. You reach down, pull another bit of roasted grain from your pouch, and feel the gentle crunch of earthbound patience in your mouth. It's not just about food. It's about rhythm. You chew with the step of the horse. You swallow with the breeze. And somewhere behind you, your horse crunches on his own handful of barley like a soft echo. You're not equals, not quite. But you're moving forward on the same fuel. Sharing a diet shaped by grass, wind, and need. You ride into the next stretch of nothing, heart steady, pouch lighter, jaw quietly at work. And when you run out of food, you'll reach the next or 2. Or chew another barley grain 30 times, pretending it's cake. The sun hangs low again, stretching everything into gold and shadow. You spot the or 2 from afar, just a modest yurt and a fenced corral, smoke curling upward like a question no one's in a hurry to answer. Your horse perks up. So do you. Because tonight you don't have to eat from a pouch. You dismount, legs stiff, bones clicking in protest, and the station keeper greets you with the familiar half-smile of someone who's cooked for messengers before. No fanfare, just a wave toward the fire and a ladle already in motion. You sit cross-legged on a worn mat, grateful for anything warm. And then like a quiet miracle arrives, dumplings. Hot, greasy, heavy with steam. You can't quite tell what's inside. But it doesn't matter. It's meat, probably mutton, maybe something else. There's always a little debate in these parts about whether that chewy bit was a tendon or just enthusiastic dough. But it's hot, and it smells like salt and home and a faint whiff of onions that might have traveled 600 miles to get here. You pop the first one whole into your mouth and immediately burn your tongue. You don't care. It's worth it. The dough is thick, irregular, handmade with sleepy hands, and someone's best guess. The filling is juicy, salted just enough, and holds its shape like a polite guest trying not to fall apart at dinner. These dumplings aren't fancy. There's no dipping sauce, no garnish. They're utility food fuel wrapped in flour. But when eaten sitting beside a fire after a 40-kilometer ride, they're divine. You sip broth from a shared bowl, mild, a bit greasy, with floating scallions if someone remembered to gather them. The ladle clinks against the pot as the station keeper stirs. Someone else hands you a thin wooden spoon and a bit of dried fruit from a communal pouch. The spoon feels like treasure. The fruit tastes like sunlight that forgot it had a bedtime. Hospitality is a sacred thread in Mongol culture. Riders weren't treated as guests exactly, but as necessary extensions of something larger. The empire, the network, the wind itself. No one knew your name, but everyone knew why you were there. And that was enough. Historians note the consistency of the Or2 relay system as one of the great logistical triumphs of the Mongol Empire. What they often miss is the human warmth built into it, not just roads and maps, but meals, dumplings, ladles, and low conversation over bubbling pots. One rider once told you, The best dumpling is the one that interrupts your complaint. You didn't understand it until tonight. You're halfway through your third dumpling when someone asks, "Want salt?" and hands you a tiny bag of coarsely ground crystals. You sprinkle it onto the next one with reverence, pretending you're a royal guest, not a grease-stained courier with saddle rash and a meat pouch named Greg. Yes, you named your pouch. You've been alone a lot. Someone else, another rider, newer than you by the look of their gear, offers you a sip of sour yogurt mixed with hot water. It's strange, tart and savory, but it settles your stomach like a lullaby with a vinegar edge. You eat slowly, savoring, talking little. It's the kind of silence that's not empty, but earned. Just the crackle of the fire, the distant snort of horses, and the rhythmic chewing of 5 humans and 1 dog who's pretending not to beg. By the end, your fingers shine with broth. Your belly is full enough to believe in morning again. And you've slipped an extra dumpling into your cloth wrap for the road, not as a snack, but as a souvenir of kindness. You stretch out beside the fire, head on your bag, warm in all the right places. Tomorrow, you ride again. But tonight, you dream of dumplings. You leave the hour 2 before dawn, belly full, cloak slightly smoky, and 1 dumpling gently squished in a side pouch. The road ahead is quiet, the kind of silence that only the steppe can hold, wide, yawning, and oddly comforting. Your horse walks slowly at first, as if digesting along with you. By midday, the wind sharpens, the clouds thicken, and the air turns oddly metallic. A storm's coming, but there's no shelter for hours. You pull your coat tighter and press on. You've been through this before. This is where Mongol ingenuity shines, not with spice or sweetness, but with function. You don't need a kitchen. You need fireless cooking. You stop at a low outcropping of rock. Nearby, there's a small pile of flat stones, blackened, worn smooth. You smile. Someone's used this spot before. You dig into your pack and pull out a tight cloth wrap, warm to the touch. Inside, a bone bundle, still radiating heat from the stones it sat on all morning. You'd placed it there after breakfast, wrapping boiled marrow bones and dried herbs inside a stitched leather pouch, then strapping it to the side of your saddle where movement and sunlight do most of the cooking for you. You unwrap it now, slowly, letting the steam rise. The marrow is soft, glistening. The broth at the bottom has thickened into a kind of jelly, warmed into something just viscous enough to drink. You slurp it down with your fingers, licking salt from your knuckles. The bone itself gets cracked between 2 stones, the inner goodness scraped with a sliver of wood or the tip of a knife. Every bit matters. You didn't light a fire. You didn't stop to cook, but you're warm now. Fed. Grounded. This method, hot stone cooking, is part science, part accident. The stones absorb heat from the sun or from a fire lit long before dawn. Riders would wrap food in leather or thick cloth, tie it near the horse's side or in their own coats, and let motion do the rest. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. Once, you unwrapped a packet and found only ash. Another time, your marrow had somehow frozen instead of warming, and you gnawed it like confused wildlife. But today's bone meal is perfect. You rinse your fingers in a cold streamlet nearby and pop a few dried turnip chips into your mouth, thin, brittle, earthy. Not quite crunchy anymore, but they soften with a sip of water. You eat them slowly, one at a time, letting the flavor build up like layers of dust on a road. Historians still argue over how advanced Mongol culinary techniques truly were. Some say primitive. Others call them portable genius. But you know the truth. When you're crossing 60 kilometers of open land with nothing but a knife and a wind-beaten pouch, the ability to cook something without fire is the kind of brilliance no scroll can explain. As you pack up, you find a stone-boiled egg, not a chicken egg, but a small quail one, once tucked into a stew bag and now soft, salted, and oddly comforting. You crack it with one hand, eat it in 2 bites, and regret not saving it for later. But that's trail logic. Later never comes. Eat the egg. You rise, brush off your cloak, and tuck the empty bone into your saddlebag. It might still have you traded for herbs, carved into a tool, or simply chewed later when the marrow memories call back to you. You ride again, full but not heavy, warm but not slow. And as the clouds finally open up and the wind changes from whisper to warning, you feel ready. Because you didn't just eat. You crafted fuel from motion, memory, and one really useful rock. The rain begins softly, more like mist than droplets, dampening your shoulders and softening the air around you. Your horse barely notices. You, however, begin to feel that quiet ache behind the eyes, the kind that says, you forgot to chew something recently. Your food pouch is nearly empty now. A few dried herbs, a smear of marrow grease on a wrapper, and one questionable piece of cheese that has aged more by accident than by intent. So you improvise. You pull your cloak tighter and reach for something most riders keep tucked away for moments like this. A bundle of chewing herbs, not quite a meal, not quite medicine, but somewhere in between. Mint, wild onion, maybe a curl of dried rhubarb root. You chew it slowly, letting your jaw wake up, your tongue adjust to the bitterness, and your stomach accept that. No, this isn't lunch. It's distraction disguised as digestion. Out here, without spices, without sugar, sometimes the only flavor you get is the memory of freshness. Riders chewed everything from dried juniper sprigs to wild thyme, not just to curb hunger, but to trick the mouth into believing something interesting was happening. You once tried a sprig of dried elderflower. It made your teeth feel like they were vibrating. You didn't repeat the experience. You chew now, slowly, as the wind picks up again. The herbs aren't good, but they are sharp. They cut through the fog in your brain and give you something to think about besides wet socks and saddle bruises. You reach for a final scrap of something. Beige. It was once bread. Now it's more of a grain tie so dry it's probably older than some hills. You nibble a corner. It crumbles into dusty flakes on your tongue. You eat it anyway. Because hunger out here is rarely dramatic. It's quiet. A dull hum that plays beneath everything else. Historians still debate what the Mongols used for seasoning. There's no chili, no cinnamon, sometimes salt, if you're lucky. But mostly, it's what the land gives, which is often air, root, grass, and the stubborn taste of motion. Once, you were given a salt lump at an Ortua gift from a merchant's pack. You shaved pieces off it like treasure, storing them in a twist of cloth and rationing them over weeks. That salt turned weak broth into something almost celebratory. You remember the first time someone sprinkled dried horse milk powder onto dried meat. They called it a creamy surprise. You called it revenge. But it worked. Sort of. Today, you had nothing. Just the herbs. The salt of your own sweat. A hint of wild dill stuck between your teeth from last week. You ride on, chewing, thinking, and wondering, for the 100th time, what it would be like to eat something fresh, not boiled, not dried, not preserved in fat or regret. Just fresh, like a plum, or a soft-boiled egg, or something that didn't crack your molars in greeting. But that's not for today. Today is for surviving with flavor that exists more in imagination than on your tongue. And somehow, that's still enough. You spit out the stem of your herb bundle, wipe your hand on your cloak, and offer a silent prayer to whatever God invented edible roots. The clouds break. A little light filters through. And your mouth, finally, stops tasting like ancient soup and stubborn grass. For now, the evening settles in slow and heavy, like a well-worn cloak sliding over the land. The sky glows peach and silver, the wind softens to a whisper, and your body reminds you again that being full isn't the same as being nourished. You're not starving, but you miss the kind of food that feels like celebration, not just survival. Which brings your thoughts to feast days. Yes, even Mongol postal riders had them. Not official holidays, not always, but moments when you arrived at a station during a festival or passed through a family encampment during a ritual slaughter or seasonal gathering. And when you did, if you were lucky, you ate like someone who didn't have to leave again at dawn. You remember one in particular. It was early spring, just before the lambing season. You'd stumbled into a small cluster of yurts on your route, planning only to water your horse and swap scrolls. Instead, you were handed a bowl of boiled mutton, fresh cheese, and a fermented stew that had been cooking in a buried pot for 2 days. There was fat floating on the surface, thick as butter, and dumplings bobbing beneath it like tiny, flowery islands of joy. You sat cross-legged beside the fire, elbows brushing the shoulders of strangers who became temporary family, and ate until your belt felt like a threat. That night, your pouch was stuffed with leftovers, rare gifts, soft cheese wrapped in cloth, slices of cooked organ meat sealed in fat, and even a piece of something that may have been candied. That was a feast day. But for every feast, there's a fast. You've also ridden through days of nothing. No stations. No herders. Just wind, bones, and a pouch of dried cheese too hard to chew. On those days, you waited. You drank only water. You let your stomach fold inward like a silent yurt and trusted that the next meal would come eventually. Some of these fasts were accidental. Others were intentional, honoring a tradition, a loss, or the lunar calendar. Fasting was a part of spiritual observance, a way to cleanse not just the body but the rider's path. You've chewed on grass out of boredom. You've prayed over broth so thin it was more memory than meal. But you've also broken fast with warm cream, ladled straight from a pot, and steamed dumplings that tasted like reunion. Historians note that Mongol food culture balanced scarcity and abundance like a rhythm. There was no daily menu. There was the moment and what you had in it. And sometimes what you had was leftovers. Now, that may not sound glamorous, but out here, fermented leftovers are almost better than fresh food. They've had time to mellow, to merge, to become something other. You once ate a ball of sour curds mixed with fermented millet and stored in a sheep's stomach. It was awful, and also not. You finished the whole thing, licking your fingers afterward like a confused child who just discovered the emotional complexity of pickles. Tonight, tucked in your pouch, is a final bite of leftover fat-wrapped meat from the last or two. It's slightly sour, a little crumbly, but it's dense, real, and still good. You eat it slowly, letting each bite carry a whisper of that firelit evening. The sound of the ladle scraping the pot, the smell of warm cheese. And then, for balance, you chew a bit of dry root. Because this is life as a rider. Feast and fast, richness and roughness, memory and movement. You finish your meal with a sip of lukewarm arag. Your horse shifts beside you, and the night begins to hum. Night stretches across the steppe like a vast wool blanket, stitched with stars and stitched, it seems, for you alone. The fires burn low at your latest stop, the horses are quiet, and you're sitting just outside the yurt, cloak pulled tight, last scraps of food unwrapped before you. This is the moment when you think about what you didn't eat. Because Mongol riders didn't just ride with what they carry, they rode with what they refused. Not out of preference, but out of principle. Some foods were sacred, others forbidden. Many fell somewhere in that vast gray zone of, we do not eat this because we are not those people. Food was as much a map of identity as the routes you galloped each day. Pork, for example, was rarely consumed by Mongols during this era. Not strictly forbidden, but culturally distant, not of their animals, not of their land. And fish? Only in some regions. Mostly ignored. Water creatures didn't hold the same significance as the herds you rode beside. You think of all the things you've passed up without question. A bowl of chicken stew offered by a foreign trader refused out of custom. A spicy lentil dish in a caravan town tasted once, politely declined. It wasn't that it tasted bad. It was that it tasted like not here. Mongol food reflected the land's logic. No ingredient too fancy, no spice too precious, no nonsense. This was food shaped by wind, hoof, and the slow simmer of movement. To step outside it too far would have meant stepping out of rhythm with your horse, your comrades, your world. Some dishes, though, were avoided not by tradition, but by necessity. You recall one pungent vat of curdled elk milk, hidden under a tarp at a border post. You took one sip and knew, instantly, that it had crossed the line from fermented to cursed. You spent the next 2 hours pretending to be full while your stomach negotiated for peace. Then there were the sacred foods, not for the road, not for riders, but for ritual. You've seen shamans prepare sacred offerings of blood, bones, and broth during ceremonies. No one touched those pots except the spirits they were meant for. You didn't ask. You didn't taste. There was always respect in abstaining. Historians mention the Mongols' adaptable diets, their incredible tolerance for harsh rations, their clever use of fat and milk to sustain themselves over thousands of miles. But they sometimes overlook the flip side, how what wasn't eaten defined the rider just as much as what was. You think back to that moment, years ago, when a new rider tore into a piece of dried cheese offered by a caravan man, not realizing it had been blessed for burial rites. The old man next to him simply reached over, took it from his hand, and buried it quietly in the dirt, whispering something you didn't catch. No anger, just ritual correction. The next day, the young rider carried his own cheese and chewed it more slowly. Tonight, your pouch is nearly empty. A few grains, a crumbling bit of dried onion. But you hold something more, a long list of flavors you've carried but never tasted, avoided but respected, declined without disdain. Because food, out here, is more than fuel. It's identity. It's boundary. It's memory. You close your pouch, lie back on the grass, and stare up at the dark sky, the stars blinking like ancient kitchen fires in some otherworldly camp. Your horse breathes softly beside you, and you drift into sleep lightly salted, faintly fermented, and entirely at peace. Now the journey slows. The fire has gone out, but the warmth lingers in the soft echo of what you've eaten and what you've shared. Your muscles grow heavy with memory. Your breath evens, syncing with the quiet rhythm of a horse at rest. The long road of the postal rider wasn't paved with luxury, but with persistence. And every bite, every chew, every crumb tucked into a pouch was a promise not of pleasure, but of survival, of moving forward, of getting there. You think about all those strange little foods, the dried curds that cracked your teeth, the fizzy milk that made you question your life choices, the sausage in a sheep's stomach, the soup made by motion, the pickle that surprised you. You remember every meal, not because it was delicious, but because it kept you going. And that's what food becomes, sometimes a quiet act of devotion to the day ahead. So let yourself rest now. Let the echoes of host fade into soft silence. Let the wind settle in the grass, and the last crumbs of salt on your lips remind you that you've traveled far, eaten well enough, and lived to tell the tale. Close your eyes. Let your jaw unclench. You've ridden across empires tonight, one slow bite at a time. Sleep now, courier of the steppe. The scrolls will wait.